Well, let's go ahead and get started. We are recording the session, so I know we'll have people still continue to join us. And I also know that at least an equal number of people that may join us today in person will take a look at the recording of the session at another time. That was certainly our experience last time around. We kind of see that with many of these sessions. People are so busy that it's hard for everybody to be in the same place at the same time, but I'm pleased that the resource, the conversation that we have will be shared with our colleagues. So my name, Randy Ruta. I serve as the CEO of the National Health Council. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the International Patient Forum, which is really intended to be a roundtable, just an open discussion of comparing notes and sharing concerns and ideas and issues and reporting out as to how it is through your experience as a patient advocate, a patient group involved in the patient community, the understanding of and your involvement in the international, the global perspective around these issues is important. So it's as much a learning session as it is a sharing session. And I'm hoping that before we finish today, we'll really understand how you would like us to go forward as the National Health Council in support of our membership as we think about and engage in advancing patient health and the goals of patients and patient advocacy globally, even as we do our work for most of you as US-based organizations, many with part of your charter being a global mission. So as you know, the mission of the National Health Council to advance the patient voice, in any decisions that are being made that affect patient health and well-being, and certainly that of their caregivers in their community. And the National Health Council, having been created more than 100 years ago, but not quite as long ago as Prevent Blindness. Thank you very much, Jeff Todd. I think you said 115. That's an impressive record. We have, though, been side-by-side collaborators in being advocates for patients. And as I say, making sure that in policy, in practice, in areas of community decision-making, that patients are at the table and understood, and that what's best for their health and for the community health is advanced. And that really has been our goal and objective, and I think one that we've been able to contribute to significantly. Right now, for the National Health Council, we've got 170 national organizations really representing the full spectrum of the healthcare community relative to patients. At our core, the majority of our members are indeed patient organizations, including those represented on the call today as speakers and those of you who have signed on. In addition, we've got our partners, our collaborators in advancing patient advocacy and health, in clinicians and researchers, in professional associations, as well as in the business and industry community, primarily pharma members, but also members drawn from the insurance industry, device and medical technology industries, and others where there's stakeholder interest in all collaborating around health and the health and welfare of our patients. I think that this is an area, as I say, kind of transitioning into the international arena, where we really feel like that patients are kindred spirits beyond borders. Many of you, as we talk today, have had experience in engaging with members of your own patient communities that live beyond the borders of the United States. And you always learn something. You're always eager to share something. And I think that's what this conversation is all about. I do want to share that for today's events, we have three organizations that have been underwriters of this International Patient Forum. That's Astellas, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck. Thank you very much to these sponsors, not only for supporting these dialogues, but then the creation of materials. And as I say, we'll determine what would be useful on an ongoing basis, supporting those efforts as well. So often the organizations that are based in the United States are oftentimes looked to as leaders, as well, maybe better resource than others that are in the international community. And so I'm pleased to say that without exception, as I talk to our membership, our patient group membership, everyone feels like they have an obligation by virtue of our service to patients to be responsive to all patients, no matter where they are, as well as the systems around those individuals. A few housekeeping things. I'm always charged with those. It's kind of giving others an opportunity to continue to sign on. But we are indeed recording this session, so just be aware of that. It will be posted to the website as well as shared with everyone who registered but maybe didn't make it on the call. Please, unless you're speaking, put yourself on mute so we don't have any extraneous noise. If you have questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A or chat function. I'll be watching that and really alerting my co-host to today's forum, Lisa Butler, to the fact that people have comments or thoughts, comments or questions that they would like to share. If you have any questions about the Zoom links or any technical issues, please reach out to our NCH meetings website or email, and we'll take care of that for you. And then do complete the evaluation form at the end of the meeting. As I say, we're always looking to do better, improve our support for our membership and through activities like these. Also, if you have thoughts after our kind of call for comment at the end of the forum, please feel free to then share those afterwards with Lisa or myself, and we'll make sure that that goes into our collective thinking about how it is that the National Health Council, all of its members, are engaged either directly or indirectly in issues affecting patients in a good way, in a way that supports their health and well-being, their caregivers and communities across the globe. It's impressive. I think there's more that we can do, and I'm excited for us to kick off this forum to really hear from all of you. So we'll start by talking a little bit about the spring forum and the issues that we talked about there. Very excited to hear how you react to those conversations that occurred at our first forum. And then we will turn to the international patient landscape. So we've got for the summary, let me just say that Lisa and Jory will be kicking things off in that space, but we'll encourage all of you to participate with your reactions to the comments that had been made. Maybe you've got further thoughts about some of those topics. Maybe you were the individual who raised some of those topics in our first meeting and have, as I say, additional thoughts or lessons learned since then. We'll talk about the international patient landscape, kind of what do we see as the issues, the activities, the priorities for the patient community globally. And you'll hear from Nicola Brook from the Patient Focused Medicine Development Organization, great organization to kind of set the stage there. I think there are a number of you on this call who might also have thoughts on the international patient landscape. I would encourage you to contribute at that point. And then we're very pleased to have Leanne West, who disclosed to me at a meeting where she's been hosting here in the US and setting up hosting a conference in Italy, I believe. And I said, you know, I think that that's part of what this forum is intended to do, to call out some of those nuts and bolts considerations for, well, how do you do that? How do you organize it? How do you budget for it? Who do you engage to have a successful meeting? How do you, enlist speakers? So Leanne's going to be sharing with us some of her experiences. And then we've asked Jeff Todd, our incoming chair for the National Health Council, effective this coming annual meeting in December. Jeff, who I know has represented the blindness community internationally, asked him to maybe share some additional perspectives to Leanne's comments. And then really turn it back to Lisa to, share her thoughts about, so where does that leave us? What might be our next steps? And invite your input to really help set our agenda for 2024 in this really exciting and dynamic global environment. So Lisa, with that, let me turn things over to you and let you get into the meat of our gathering here.
Wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if I didn't start off on mute, right? So
all of us.
Yeah, thanks very much, Randy. I'm Lisa Butler, Executive Director of the GBS CIDP Foundation and a member of the board of the National Health Council, where I'm very honored to serve. So thank you for inviting me to this conversation today. And I will be joined by my colleague, the CEO at the Immune Deficiency Foundation, Jory Berry. But I thought I would start off sort of recapping what I saw as some of the major issues that were brought up at the spring meeting. And then Jory and I are going to have a little sort of back and forth about our impressions from that. So certainly at the spring meeting, there was a major theme of patient advocacy and that we need to enact change and raise awareness. We need communication to exchange that information. We definitely discussed a role of technology, telemedicine, wearable devices. How can they be incorporated as we move forward? We talked about a need for accessibility in healthcare, awareness of those that need it most, and making sure that we're serving all of those, particularly in underserved communities. There was a call for HCP involvement. Are we involving the thought leaders, both on the HCP side and the general stakeholder side? Are we involving all of them in the conversation? Are we using what they can contribute? We talked about a need to understand staffing and recruiting challenges. I'll share some feedback later, but I'm very proud to say our foundation, we've just hired our first EU employee. So very, very excited to share about that. But overall, the recommendations from this spring meeting were also around research and innovation on a global scale, that we felt there was a need to increase global resources, to deeper, more frequent discussions with global leaders and stakeholders in the healthcare sector, and policies that make healthcare more accessible, affordable, and effective. And certainly, last but not at all least, is there was a call for collaboration. And I think that as groups, as members of the NHC, there's a lot we can do together. And Randy and I have discussed some really interesting experiences we both have had recently. And throughout the discussion, I really look forward to hearing from you all too. If you have thoughts on some of that collaboration, I think, we're stronger together, as many of us already know. So that brings me to Jory. And Jory has a very interesting perspective for us. I felt that a lot of the folks on the spring meeting were sort of in the sort of initial, or I'll say sort of moderate stages of establishing their international presence and what that means for their organization. But the Immune Deficiency Foundation is a few steps ahead of that, in that they have an international organization. So Jory brings a really unique perspective to the conversation, I think. So Jory, welcome. And in reviewing the spring meeting, what resonated with you the most?
Well, thank you, Lisa. And thank you for letting me kind of share some feedback. I wasn't able to participate in the spring forum, but I did read the summary and I did listen to the recording. And for me, it was really the theme of what struck me the most was the theme of communication being a critical component of advocacy work, and the exchanging of information and shareable resources in particular, and then also consistent messaging. And kind of how my view of that, coming from my organization, is for the Immune Deficiency Foundation, we don't have expertise in, for example, access to care issues in other countries. But what we do have expertise in is education and educational resources and information. So we really try to work to make sure we can make those freely available and accessible to the extent we can. So that resonated with me. And proactively, when we have funding, we have translated resources on a specific topic. An example for us would be severe SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency. We have a toolkit for that, and we've translated it into 12 languages. We're also working in 2024 to identify kind of our top most downloaded or requested resources into Spanish. And this whole conversation is timely because we just recently had two representatives or contacts in two countries reach out to us to translate some of our information. And while we can't always take that on ourselves, we're able to freely allow that licensing. And then as a bonus, now we have that resource in another language for us to utilize as well. So all of that's to say, sharing resources, just knowing what we can bring to the table. And I'll be honest, for our organization, knowing what it's important for us to know what we can't or shouldn't bring to the conversation, that struck me. And also just the consistent, the conversation around consistent messaging and communication among organizations globally. We, as you mentioned, we participate with an international group that I can talk about a little bit later, but we are on international planning committees for events like PI Awareness Week or Plasma Awareness Initiatives. And I think that's important because we all amplify our common messaging. And when we amplify that, when we have consistent themes, and I think there's a lot of strength in awareness when we're all saying the same within our area, all saying the same thing at the same time. So that one piece, there were lots of pieces that resonated, but that one piece really did with me, because that's kind of the view that we take of what our role is for the Immune Deficiency Foundation internationally.
So question for you there, and thank you for sharing all that, Jory. In sharing the translations, how have you been successful in doing that? Through what means have you been sharing your information, your translation?
So we have it in a reactive way. We have it available on our website, but we field requests through our Ask IDF. So we will field requests for information. This is what was a little, I don't know if it's unique, but for those of us who participate in an international organization, it's a great, our IPOPI, which I'll talk about in a second, is a great referral for us. So we first make sure that there's not something, if we don't have it, we make sure that we send that individual to connect them with IPOPI. We also make sure IPOPI knows about the resources we have, and we have a pretty strong connection to make sure that they are aware so that they can share it with our fellow member organizations that are part of IPOPI. And that's because the Immune Deficiency Foundation has a board member who sits on IPOPI, a former chair of our board who now is a board member there. So we really utilize IPOPI to help spread awareness of that, and or to refer to IPOPI if they already have something in that particular language. And then I, on a smaller scale, stay in touch outside of IPOPI with a couple of my peers in other countries.
So IPOPI, can you, I should have asked you that first, right? Can you explain that and the relationship and the acronym?
Absolutely. I know I know. Why wouldn't everyone know what IPOPI means? I joined the Immune Deficiency Foundation 2 years ago, and that was the first thing that I had to Google was IPOPI. I know there could be others. We're not completely unique, but not everyone has this kind of global organization they may be a member of. But like some, the Immune Deficiency Foundation is fortunate to have an international group that is representative of organizations across the globe who are devoted to our specific condition. For us, that is IPOPI. It's the International Patient Organization for Immunodeficiencies. That's what IPOPI stands for. We have a really special connection to them because one of the co-founders of the Immune Deficiency Foundation was also a co-founder and president of IPOPI. His wife even wrote our children's book on the immune system. It's called Our Immune System, and that's used all over the world to explain the immune system to children. One of the reasons there was the need to form that organization and for our organization to be involved in that is because I think Randy may have even alluded to this in his opening remarks, but the patient voice, the patient experience, the condition itself, that those have universal themes that certainly cross borders. So, the way we kind of view our ongoing role with IPOPI is improvement and progress that's made in one country that impacts for us in particular, reducing the time to diagnosis or availability and access to, current treatments and new therapeutics, new discoveries. That benefits the entire community. That really can benefit people across the globe. And we're a member of IPOPI. While we're focused, our organization, a little more in the US, and we have much to do in the US, we know we have a responsibility to do our part internationally, and we do that through IPOPI. We've adopted the global statistic that 70 to 90% of people living with a primary immunodeficiency have yet to be diagnosed. And we know that that's true in our country, possibly for different reasons than in other countries. But as we identify solutions, we're readily sharing that with our counterparts through this organization and outside of it. And we're learning from them. We just had a call a couple of months ago with our counterpart in the Netherlands. They are doing a pilot to add an additional condition to the newborn, one of our conditions to the newborn screening panel. We're learning from them because that may be something that we take on in the US. And I wouldn't have known about that, nor would we have had that relationship if it wasn't through our mutual membership in in IPOPI. So, I speak to my counterparts in Canada and Australia periodically. I need to do more and branch out, but IPOPI's been an incredible resource and connector and convener for us.
It sounds like it. I hope to be there someday. But can you share a little bit about the sort of the formality of the relationship? Are you sort of true partners? Does one report to the other? How do you handle that?
It's very similar to the National Health Council. Believe it or not, we are a member. It's a member organization. We elect a board. We vote on. They have a General Assembly meeting annually, and then they also have some other meetings throughout the year where we vote on policy changes. We vote on the strategic plan. We vote on the board members, which have all the, similar bylaws and similar, rights of a member organization. So it is maybe not so much a reporting relationship, but they, like I feel we have a voice and a vested interest, and the National Health Council helps facilitate, us bringing together and helping us to define our collective strategy. All of that is what IPOPI does. That's kind of the setup for IPOPI as well. It mirrors it very similarly. Yeah. Except I will say one good thing about that is I think sometimes you need a lead from within. So not reporting, but really taking direction because of expertise on what strategy should be or what our involvement should be in certain situations and in certain countries, because they have the credibility and we do not. So in that way, I consider them an expert, but it's definitely a mutual, it's definitely a partnership in all the ways you would describe it.
Absolutely. Randy, does that resonate with you and conversations you've had?
It really does. And I love that mutual support, cross-learning, the synergies that occur, between, the U.S. organizations, the international organizations. It's really, really great. And many, had their origins kind of with each other and have then gone on to kind of focus on different things where there's synergy. Lisa, I'm seeing Annie Kennedy has a comment which kind of speaks to what Jory was just sharing relative to, I believe, like Rare EU, and just how models that work here in the US or work in Europe can really be adopted and taken forward. I think we had some conversations around those in the spring forum, but you might want to check with Annie to see if she wanted to comment on that.
Annie, would you like to share?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Kennedy with the Every Foundation. It's great to be here with everyone. And I should say before I make my comment about Eurordis, we're also proud to be a member of PFMD. So it's wonderful to see Nicholas here. So we, as many know, facilitate what's called Rare Disease Week, the end of February every year. Sometimes it overlaps the end of February, beginning of March, and have about usually close to 1,000 advocates from around the country who come here to Washington, and we bookend that week. The beginning of the week or the end of the week, there's a day at FDA and then respectively a day at NIH. So we collaborate with our federal agency partners, and then we have advocates who go to the Hill and make sure we raise our collective voices and make sure that the priorities of our community are well known on the Hill. And over the years, we have started to work with our European counterparts, Eurordis, as they have really been intrigued by this model. And so for a few years, Eurordis would come and attend Rare Disease Week. And we've evolved that relationship. And now through our Rare Giving program, so we have a program where we provide resources to our rare disease community, patient advocacy organizations to support their policy and advocacy efforts. But last year, for the first year, we granted funding to Eurordis to support them creating a similar model. It's starting much smaller, but we provided some funding support to Eurordis. And then we actually sent members of our leadership team who helped lead our Rare Disease Week program to Eurordis's program as they started to bring some of their patient advocacy leaders from around Europe together to really talk about what that patient engagement model might look like in Europe. And of course, it will look very different there than it looks here, but they're really just beginning to build that. And then even as recently as last week, the head of our legislative team who leads our rare disease suite program met with Eurordis again to talk about what this year will look like, and how we will continue to expand that relationship as they are continuing to grow their programs. And for us, what we're really excited about is one of the main pillars of our policy work is our newborn screening work. And newborn screening is obviously a tremendous priority across Europe as well. And so we're not just looking at how we help support their growth and expansion of their advocacy efforts, but how we look at the policy work that we're doing, which obviously is global work, and then help grow and expand this into global policy efforts and where we can really help this evolve and bleed out into other areas of work. So this is nascent, this is new, but we're really excited about this percolating relationship and growing this even further across the various different countries that we're working with now.
That's great, Annie. Thank you for sharing that. I love that you're recreating something that's been so successful here, and working with your European counterparts to create it for them, and probably change it a little bit to be very specific to where they are and the challenges that they face.
Yeah, and it's really important just to clarify that we're not doing, it's not EveryLife doing this, it's Eurordis doing it, with us answering questions, providing resources, providing insights, but that is Eurordis's program for them to own, and for us to just be a support in any way that we can. And we're delighted to be along for the ride and to be a partner. But it's really important to us that it's not EveryLife going into Europe, but it's finding who the partners are in Europe that we can collaborate with and work with. So.
That's so well said. I think that we have found that you can't go into Europe as sort of the US and tell them, do it the US way. But I think as you have structured it to be the resource and let them do it their way with your support, really sets you up to be successful. So I can't wait to the next call when that has happened for Eurordis and hear about their experience. So thank you. Go ahead, Randy.
I'll raise my hand. I just a question for Annie. So don't go too far away, Annie. How did your board react? Because I'm assuming that your mission, your charter, as a nonprofit, like so many of the National Health Council organizations, is really US focused. And yet, you have this opportunity to engage with non-US passionate patient groups and researchers and others. Was it much of a leap for them to really endorse, maybe even be a part of that outreach to Eurordis and the kind of work that you've done?
So because we are doing this through our rare giving, so let me first say you are correct that we are US focused as the EveryLife Foundation. And so because we are doing this through our rare giving program, so really it came through our support. And the way that we framed this to begin with was through rare giving. We didn't really have to think about how we're not expanding the mission at all. We're just thinking about how we think about what support to the broader rare disease community looks like. And then how we serve the community and those who are coming and learning from us. We've done that in other instances as well. So when we launched our National Economic Burden of Rare Disease study, many of the patient advocacy partners who came to us to learn from that study and to learn how we had done it were partners outside the US, were organizations outside the US who wanted to learn from that model. And just as we did with organizations and partners inside the US, I was very eager to talk to organizations and leaders outside the US and share our survey and share the methodology. Similarly with other policy efforts that we work on, we often will talk to and collaborate with other partners. In newborn screening, we've worked with partners in the UK and supported their efforts with Parliament. We've collaborated on efforts with Australian partners on a pilot that they're doing in newborn screening. So we don't have to step outside of our mission. This is a global community and rare diseases are rare. So if we don't work together, we're really digging our heads in the sand. And so that we haven't had a struggle with the board in that way, as long as, going back to what Lisa emphasized, and underscored, it again, it's not every life going and taking over the world, if you will.
Right.
It's really
Right.
us sharing our learnings and being good partners and being willing to be good partners. And I also have to say, we learn just as much, if not
Mhm.
more, in these
Mhm.
collaborations. It's really important for us to learn. I mean, we do a ton of regulatory work. If we're not paying attention to what the decisions and regulatory priorities and legislative priorities are happening in Europe are, then we are going to ignore some really important trends that are going to hit us here in the US. And so I think that, and our board certainly understands that. So I think maybe that's the key message for all of us is, as we all know, this is a global world. That's a little redundant, and our board certainly understands that.
That's great.
Annie, can I ask you one question? In what you were just describing when you were talking about working with partners, for instance, I think you mentioned in Australia. Can you define what you meant by partners? Is that a volunteer, an organization, an institution? What is the definition of partner there?
It can look like all of that. In these cases, it's usually patient advocacy organization leaders who are coming to us and are driving specific projects. In this instance, it was someone who pulled together a coalition that was working on leading a newborn screening pilot. So it's whoever the driver is of the initiative that came to us to collaborate, as we lead a newborn screening boot camp and some newborn screening work. And so they came to learn from us and some of the tools and resources that we had built. So it really depends on who the driver is, but I would say more often than not, there are patient advocacy organizations that we're working with and collaborating with.
That's great.
That's great.
Thank you so much, Annie. And please, friends who are joining us, please continue to raise your hand, and Randy will help prompt me that we've got more to share. But moving on with some of our reactions to the spring panel, Joy, I mentioned to you that there was a lot of talk about the need for sort of globally minded healthcare professionals. And I'm curious, with your relationship with your EU organization, do you share a medical scientific advisory board, and or is your medical scientific advisory board global?
Ours is not global. Although we have someone who is not based in the US who's on our medical advisory committee. That being said, a member of our medical advisory committee is a member of IPOPI's medical advisory. I think they call it medical advisory panel. I think it's what they call it. So there are immunologists who we work with that are part of IPOPI's committee themselves, but in particular, we have a member of our MAC, we call it our medical advisory committee, who's also on the medical advisory panel of IPOPI.
Mm-hmm.
But ours is US. We don't share it. Ours is US based. I guess you could say we share a member. I share a member.
Okay. So for our organization, our medical advisory board is global. And that's a sort of key signal to us that as an organization, we need to be more representative globally. So we're sort of taking a lead from our medical scientific advisory board that these are the world's experts. So how can we help share their expertise where they are globally? And I just thought I'd share one resource that one of our doctors shared with us through the Global Health Network Knowledge Hub. So I'll explain how we've been involved in that. And then I'm curious if anybody else has had any experience or successes with organizations like this. So in our space, we work with neuromuscular neurologists, and they brought this to us. Again, it's called the Global Health Network Knowledge Hub. And this is where trusted knowledge and research is available free all over the world. And it has major exposure in low and middle income countries. So they focus on community engagement, study operations for research, training and career development, again, research updates, science, data science, but very much for the medical community to share their learnings and their knowledge, and very, very helpful with a focus on low and middle income countries, which we feel are very much at risk, certainly for our patient population. But Randy, do you see anybody that has a comment on something like that?
I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment, but I would encourage anyone on the call to please react to Lisa, because I think that's really a compelling point.
So after this is over, I'm happy to share more about that. It's certainly not just for Guillain-Barré syndrome and neuromuscular disease, but I think a great resource for others to tap into as well. Okay, how about Jory, back to you, international conferences outside of the US, where maybe you join or maybe some other National Health Council members could join.
So I'll be honest, we're a bit limited in what we participate in. For the Immune Deficiency Foundation, we participate in one international conference annually. It is organized by IPOPI. During the odd number years like this, we host IPOPI hosts their own conference. It's called IPIC, the International Primary Immunodeficiencies Congress, I believe is what it's known as. And then during even numbered years, so last year I was able to participate, they host a patient advocacy group kind of general meeting in conjunction with ESID, the European Society for Immunodeficiencies, which I actually think is brilliant because you can capitalize on all the immunologists that are across Europe and even outside of Europe that are attending. So it's great synergy. But and IPOPI has participated in this next one, but personally, I think that the Immune Deficiency Foundation needs to get more involved, and that's with LACID's conference. It's the Latin American Society for Immunodeficiencies. I know all of those are PI specific, but I guess my point would be in terms of how I would like to see us kind of grow in this area is, while we've been more participatory in Europe through IPOPI, we've been a little less so in Latin America, and we need to branch out. And plus, I live in Texas. I think I could get to, and I know their conference was in Mexico City just recently. I could get to Mexico City faster than I can get to Baltimore, which is where our hub office is. So, I mean, I really have no excuse whatsoever. But thus far for us, primarily focused in our area. But a learning for me is we've been primarily in one other continent. We got to move out and look for. I would be interested in other international conferences that are more broader that other NHC members might be participating in. I'd always look for another opportunity for that as well.
Thank you. I think it really underscores the fact that as we're looking to move outside of our borders here in the US, that I think it's really important to find areas where we can collaborate and share and find these commonalities so that we can have a stronger presence, right? I mean, for instance, we alone, it would be very difficult to, I think, go into some of these countries and have a very specific conference. But I think if we could share with one another and find some commonalities. For instance, Jory, our communities both take plasma products. So could we do some kind of conference together in Latin South America around plasma, right? Probably, yes. So, but I think one thing that struck me when you were talking, Jory, is that, like we attend HCP type conferences that are all the neurologists, right? But so do we attend patient conferences, or are we attending, HCP focused conferences where we can always raise awareness about the organization and that kind of thing? Annie, did you have some thoughts on this topic too?
I hate to keep speaking, and I don't know
please.
Whether Elsa or anyone from ALS community is here today, but so in a former life, I spent many years working with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and I had served as the director of the National ALS Division. And the ALS community is actually a super well organized international community, and has an international ALS MND alliance, because ALS is actually referred to as motor neuron disease around the world. And that alliance has a formalized structure. So it has a leadership committee, a formalized steering committee with term limits, and representatives from the academics and patient advocacy organizations that serve on the steering committee, and has a international conference that rotates continents each year and organizations that host it. But it has, Lisa, to your point earlier, it does have resources for healthcare professionals and clinicians. It has resources for basic scientists and translational sciences. But it also has, really importantly, resources for patient advocacy organizations and patients. And then collectively, so as members, we paid dues to belong, and the dues were stratified based on the income of the organizations. And then those dues supported missions to underserved countries and populations. And then there would be providers who would volunteer to go on those missions each year and go into countries that really needed support for their ALS communities, and go in and help either stand up clinics or help some of those communities that really needed resources. And then various countries there would be sort of this needs and wants electronic board that was posted, and people could donate equipment and resources. UPS would help sponsor supplies to be sent. So it was really a beautiful model for how the international community could come together and support one another. As an example, one year Iceland needed resources for their patients, but there were literally like 13 people living in Iceland with ALS. And so it was not a lot for the international community to come together and provide resources to serve Iceland that particular year. So anyway, it's just a really nice model when you look at how a community can come together and think about how you can stand one another up if you really can isolate specific needs.
I love that needs and wants electronic board.
Mhm.
And if they need more people in Iceland, I will go. But, but I think I love all of what you said about that. Even the sort of subtlety in how we call ALS here in the US ALS, and we need to understand that in Europe or in other parts of the world, right, it's called motor neuron disease. We need to make sure we're using the right language to be effective. But I would imagine that ALS has a different level of funding than many of us. So I love what you described, but we can go at it piece by piece. So Randy, do I have time for one more question for Jory? I know we're ending the time of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you, Annie. Please keep chiming in. Jory, I'm curious if you have been engaged with pharma at all on any of these global initiatives.
We have, it's interesting because IPOPI and the Immune Deficiency Foundation share a lot of the same pharma partners. So we've not specifically on global issues because our work with them is through IPOPI, who is their kind of their partner in that realm. So it's a little bit, it's funny. It's just, we don't talk to the same people, right? Different arms, but their list is the same as our list of who we work with, but we work with them on US based initiatives, and then through IPOPI with the same partners on global initiatives.
So we have found that that pharma is very supportive of our global interest, and last year, we launched what we called the Global Listening Tour, and pharma actually supported us to let us hire a facilitator to have conversations with our volunteers in different parts of the world. We went to Europe in person. We're doing it in Asia Pac virtually, but to meet with our volunteers and really understand kind of what their needs and wants are, sort of a little bit like Annie was describing, but so we can really try to understand the landscape a little bit better. But I feel like, most of the pharma partners we all work with are much larger and do have a global presence, and they're more than willing to introduce us to, their counterparts in medical affairs or marketing or commercial or whatever it is in different parts of the world. And they can be very helpful in helping us understand the landscape.
Maybe that's a good moment for me to add a comment, if you don't mind.
Please.
So for folks who don't know me, I'm Kelly Cox. I'm Senior Director for Global Alliance Development at Johnson & Johnson, and so have a rare role in terms of being both global and US, which organizationally, I guess, is rare. And my team of two, Ashley Zofer, is on the call as well. And so, longtime big supporters of National Health Council, and the U.S. is part of the world. So, I really appreciated Annie's comments about sort of, it's not for us to go out and conquer and colonialize. It's for us to be part of the world and to learn from each other, et cetera. And so usually on these on NHC calls, I'm pretty quiet because I want to hear from the patient groups. But in this instance, I guess I would share, and happy to have conversations with people offline as well. How we're thinking about it and how we want to help, capacity build, so that more patients have a bigger voice. In the conference space, which you mentioned earlier, when we do go to global conferences, it's absolutely fantastic in terms of knowledge sharing and learning. And you find amazing case studies in South Korea that you can actually apply in Mexico or the US. It's kind of remarkable that way. So the World Patients Alliance is a newer group, and they had their first global meeting last year. IAPO is the International Alliance of Patient Organizations. They've historically also done conferences, including one we sponsored in Asia Pacific. And you do need sponsors. I mean, even for translation services, things like that, they're more complex to put together. So I'll stop there because I've gone from very high level to very granular very quickly. But maybe we'll chime in at other points in the discussion.
Thank you, Kelly. I was actually, that was perfect that you jumped in. I was actually going to call and see if you'd be willing to comment on that. But would you agree, at least for your organization, that, generally very supportive of patient advocacy groups that want to have a stronger global presence?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Randy, I think I've taken up more than my time, so I will thank Jory for her observations and comments and participation. Really appreciate your perspective.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jory. And of course, Lisa, you're going to be co-hosting throughout the meeting with me, so don't go too far away either. Kelly is modest. Her organization, Johnson & Johnson, was the first out of the gate to support literally our coming together with this conversation, in part because it really was Kelly who spurred my thinking that we really could add something of member value and also mission value by just simply talking amongst each other about what are we doing, what more could we be doing, how could we share, not reinvent the wheel. Maybe the Health Council, as a result of this conversation, would say, let's put up a calendar to know where some of those meetings that, Kelly just mentioned, and maybe there's a little brainstorming that takes place before and after is, who's going? Oh, let me see you there. Let's get together, or let me know how this turned out, or look for these participants or speakers. Just that kind of informal connection, I think, could lead to some real sense of discovery, alignment that might translate into clinical trial, experiences that we could learn from, or any number of things. And Kelly, I just want to acknowledge your thought leadership that really sent us down this path. And I'm glad you're part of the conversation today, given how busy your schedule is, for you and Ashley to participate, because I think you're getting a sense of just how sincere and broad and also how well positioned we are to just call this out and then support those organizations that maybe would have an interest in doing more, doing differently. One thing that comes to mind with our pharma partners is many have regional representatives of their companies in the different continents, in the different markets. They're an excellent resource to find out who in the patient community we might want to be talking to or whatever. So there's that ability where sometimes it's our pharma partners that are really as close to the patient community as we are oftentimes, or know that there are conferences and things. And I think we could turn to Kelly and her colleagues to say, keep us in the loop as to what you think is coming. I know Asia's gotten very active in this space. Latin America, I think, really wants to make a greater contribution. Mexico, is a leader in human rights and disability rights, and really wants patient advocacy to be built into their system differently than what they're currently experiencing. Lots of opportunity. So, Lisa, why don't I go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Nicola Brooks. Many of you know Nicola, who is the executive director for the Patient-Focused Medicine Development, which actually also has a medical device focus as well. But really, PFMD, and I'm just thrilled to be on the board there. Mark Booten, who was my predecessor, had served on the board. He said, "Oh, if you're invited, you definitely need to respond." And I couldn't thank him enough for that. PFMD really has become a global focal point for the patient engagement movement. And it's through both bringing patient groups together, really sharing best practices, building tools and templates. Really, Nicola, over the years, the National Health Council and PFMD have collaborated on a lot of the things now that look at patient experience mapping, core impact sets that really are patient focused, training modules, things that really are the tools by which we can make sure that patients are indeed at the table when decisions are being made about their personal health or people with whom they share the experience of a disease or chronic condition. When you look at PFMD, I mentioned earlier POF, the Patient Engagement Open Forum, that really has become a global convening, slightly different from some of the others that were mentioned already, but really powerful in engaging not just us as a patient community, but also our stakeholders from the FDA, from the European counterparts, from others who are based in Brussels at EU, who are really responsible for the regulatory environment, the innovation environment around our pharma partners that collectively then allows us to understand each other and go forward. So I'm thrilled, Nicola, that you would take this time late in your day to come to us from Brussels and share with us your sense of what is the landscape for patients, patient groups, particularly around patient engagement, but just generally, what are you seeing? What would you want to flag for our National Health Council community not already engaged in PFMD that actually may lead them to explore membership there and certainly get involved?
Thank you, Randy, for that very nice introduction. So yes, I come here with a few observation trends of what I think I can bring to this group. We talk about the burden of the patient community across the globe for different reasons, and maybe some new opportunities that we see on our radars. But maybe first a quick word about PFMD. So I think Lisa mentioned collaboration very early in this discussion. And actually, PFMD it was a roundtable. It was not an organization back in 2012, around there, of a few individuals from 12 different organizations, 6 patient organizations, Europe, US, and 6 more global organizations from the pharma side. And basically, the whole point was like, how can we progress the patient engagement practice, knowing that, yes, we all have some case studies to tell or nice story to share, but actually it's not yet a practice. It's clearly far from being systemic or systematic in our organization, and beyond organization, it's even worse. So how can we address that? And so the whole point of what has become PFMD, patient-focused medicine development, was to bring all the stakeholders around the table, and it was blurring boundaries, whether it's geographic boundaries, stakeholder boundaries, or whatever boundaries we can have in mind. So today we are close to 50 members with a very different type of organization. So we would have pharma, we would have patient organization, but in the patient community, umbrella organization, umbrella of umbrella organizations, country-specific organizations. So we have quite a good mix in terms of patient organization. Most of it US and Europe, but we start more and more members in Asia as well. Randy mentioned that there is a movement picking up in that region. And so our topic is actually the transversal topic. So the one that you will not talk into the specific conference, the vertical conference that most of our organizations are going to. It's like, how can we progress the practice of patient engagement? What it is to collaborate together between pharma and patient organization, between regulators and patient organizations. So a lot of topics that actually are very often discussed in silos within. So if I talk about pharma, it's in silos within the company, at least when PFMD was shaped. It's actually improving quite a bit recently. But so the whole point is like, how can we meet, invest in the collaboration to improve the practice of patient engagement? There are three core goals. So first, like scale patient engagement wider, like we started with medicines development only, and now it's like medtech, digital health system in general. And deeper is like where there is patient engagement, how can we improve it and make it more systematic? So that's the goal number one. The second goal is to what we call enable the ecosystem around the patient engagement. And I will come back on that one in a second with a concrete example with NHC. And then the last one is a specific focus on digital health. Just to set the scene, I just wanted to highlight a little bit who is PFMD and what do we do. An example of collaboration on enabling the ecosystem for the patient engagement and patient community to evolve is the contract framework between industry and patient organizations. So it was known and reported by all patient organizations that it was actually a nightmare to sign contracts with industry. Very often dealing with a legal department on one side and then one person on the other side that has with a contract of 30 pages or more, initially designed for a provider, not for a partner, certainly not a patient organization. And so actually there was the cancer community in Europe had started to do some survey to identify the issues, the clauses that were repetitively an issue. And so from that survey, we work with NHC to actually design what we have called guiding principles for contracts between industry and patient organization. From these guiding principles, we now have template contracts, some specific done by NHC for the US, some more global as well. But that was a piece of work that I started into the cancer community in Europe. Went to NHC in the US, then went back to Europe to do the template. And so it was like a kind of a ping pong to actually build each time on the progress from a specific organization to develop it further and bring it in another region or another therapeutic area. And so that's the type of example that we keep replicating that type of example. And this contract have become now the work on fair market value. Again, NHC has a specific calculator for the US, and there is we have calculators for other regions as well. And so that's the type of project where it's collaboration in practice. And something I wanted to mention, and I hear that a little bit in discussion, collaboration doesn't happen by magic. And so it's really important that you have to invest that, your time, your resource to agree that most of the time, all the organizations around the table have their own agenda, and that agenda is very often the primary agenda. So focusing and keeping the shared purpose of a given group is really, really important and very difficult to do. And so that's one of the key elements in collaboration, is that to keep an eye on that. So you mentioned, and I like your intervention, Kelly, a bit earlier. I think I call that the synergy. So the people in a given organization that are willing to go out, that are willing to invest time and to go a bit beyond the primary purpose of a given organization. But when you identify, there are not that many people that are synergists in a given organization. And so it's important to identify these people and then to nurture them. They are precious. So, and when you lose your contact in a pharma company, you never know who is the next contact that you will get. And it's very often a long process, and the other way it's true as well. So it's really important to nurture the relationship between the different organizations, and it's very often individuals in these organizations that you should invest on. And so basically, I wanted to just now making a bit of a step back, the trends. And so the very first thing is that we have just published a paper which is actually all the recent events from decision makers, like new guidances, new positions, new new tools that actually health authorities have deployed in the last year when it comes to patient engagement or patient experience data. And so we use that a little bit as our barometer to see the progress of patient engagement. And so this actually, when we look at that, we see like there was like in the last year over 30 new events, increasing expectations in terms of patient engagement from decision makers or health authorities across the globe. And it's in the US, it's in Japan, it's in Europe, it's everywhere. So actually, from that perspective, we can really see that patient engagement is actually on a very good track. And actually, we are making a lot of progress. The demand are increasing. And so that's really important. That's very positive. And now, one of the consequences of that, and a couple of consequences, but there is also a burden on the patient community. And so what we hear more and more is the issue that actually more and more stakeholders have more and more needs, but as opposed to be system-centric around the patient community, they become patient-centric as individual entities. So the end result is that the patient organization on a given condition for a given geography has to respond to more and more requests for more and more entities, and that becomes very difficult to deal with. And at the same time, what I hear in Europe and in the US, and it's a case in Asia too, the resources allocated to the patient community are actually shrinking. And so for different reasons, I think in Europe and in the US, but what I hear a lot is that the leaders of the patient community really start to suffer from the doing more with less, and very difficult situation to deal with. And I can hear it's clearly for different reasons, practically speaking, in the field in the US and in Europe, but the same consequences. And so a lot of pressure on the leadership and on the staff of every given organization to actually deal with that. That's the problem of sustainability for the patient community. And at the same time, there is another issue, which is the complexity of patient engagement. And that was actually at the patient engagement open forum that Randy just mentioned, that Robin Ben from the FDA was putting on the table. So now, given the fact that we have more and more guidances for patient preferences, for this, for that, and so on, actually, it becomes more and more difficult to see the forest from the trees. I'm never sure I get this expression right in English. I hope you understand me. But so basically, it's really difficult to make sense of where do you start your patient engagement journey, whether you're a patient organization that try to help another entity or this given entity that has very often a new. We have some organization, the bigger pharma, that clearly start to be on top of it and develop the processes. And there's still a lot of work to do, but it's not like they are lost in front of the complexity. But other organizations, more in the biotech, for example, are actually just discovering it right now and really not sure on how to deal with it. And so the complexity becomes now a barrier not to engage the patient community. So we were, in the past, there was the lack of awareness and understanding. The demand is increasing, but now with the demand, the complexity is also increasing. And as a result, we also have a challenge in deploying more of patient engagement. And so for that, a huge work on, and it's coming from FDA itself, like on simplifying the roadmap for patient engagement is actually something that we will have to develop moving forward. So the last challenge is like, the more or less the economic model for the patient community. That's in Europe, there are plenty of discussion now because the only funding sources would be pharma. I think in the US, you have more options than in Europe. And so a lot of patients advocates are turning as consultants, which creates tension. And actually, there is a consultancy world created next to the patient community, like patient organization world. And so like, what could be the right economic engine for this community moving forward? Because for the moment, there's clearly an evolving sector, but we don't have a very clear picture on where it's going. And I have heard that in the US, what's the name of this organization? The research public bodies that is involving patients. I'm lost the name of that one. But there was also at some point a lot of money pushed to the system, but by that doesn't ring a bell? The research community engaging the patient community?
PCORI.
NIH, all of
PCORI.
us.
Yeah, I was gonna
PCORI.
say,
PCORI,
yeah.
So when PCORI came out, actually, apparently in the US, there was this same type of tension between consultant and the patient community. And so I see that in Europe right now, and there is no clarity about the right economic model moving forward. So there are key challenges there.
Mhm.
There are also new opportunities. The investor community. And actually, there is a whole discussion. I know in the US, there is a very polarized debate around ESG, so environment, social, and governance aspects that are about the sustainability about various industries. But whether you believe in ESG or not, actually, more and more what we see is investors consulting the patient community to validate their investments. So are we really addressing unmet needs? And so when we start to have that dialogue, and actually I've heard an investor recently telling that he was talking to CEOs of biotechs to actually tell them, you need to engage patients, and the CEO looked at him, why would I do that? But when the investor is asking, it's still a very huge weight on the given company to actually to make it happen. So I think there is a huge opportunity for the patient community here, because in the past we have worked a lot to have with the regulators, but I think investors have become as important as regulators now to make the patient movement go to the next level. And so it's really important because we influence the top of the organization when we go through the investors. Another opportunity is digital health. It's strange enough that one of the most user-centric sector, digital health, is actually the least patient engagement focused, because what they think is that because they look at the user behavior on a screen and what button you push or not on a given screen on a device, they believe that it is engagement. And actually, as opposed to pharma in the past, where they have to do the whole step, here they believe they are right, and so they first have to do a step back before we can progress. And that's a very interesting dynamic to observe. And so there is a huge opportunity for the patient community. And I will finish with AI on the opportunities, because actually a lot of people should worry about what AI will do to their job. But actually that's for the patient community, I see that as an opportunity, because the value of turning data into evidence and so on brought by AI can be done only with the data that the patient community can bring. And so for me, that maybe the data analyst should be afraid for their job, but the patient community should actually look at AI as an opportunity to make more with the evidence that it can generate, without challenging the core of the value of the patient community. And I think for me, provided that we make the effort to invest in how to understand enough of AI, I think AI is a massive opportunity for the patient community. And just to finish, so for me, the focus point moving forward will be developing the value, socializing the value of the patient community, because the problem of funding we face, and certainly in Europe, is also because the patient community, the value of patient community is actually undermined, or there's a lack of awareness. And we could do a huge piece of work to actually transversally develop the value of this community as a sector, which is actually unknown by governmental entities, by the public, and so on, very often. So I think there is a huge piece of work we can do there. There is this development of the intelligence about patient engagement. So if we want to continue to grow, we need to be able to communicate properly. I think it was said a bit earlier, to actually learn from what we are doing, to train new people coming. But for all of that, we need intelligence, and intelligence in various shapes or forms. And so we need to develop that. And it's finished to have a kind of spreaded case studies here and there. We need to have the right case studies with the right data already made for the right person when that person needs it. And so I think we need to build that patient engagement intelligence. We have done a lot of work on patient engagement and patient experience data, and I think that will continue. Most decision makers use data, very often without patient engagement. But so it's the merging of the two that actually will make that we meet these decision makers where they are. And so we talk a lot about evidence-based advocacy, and for me, that's the merge of experience data and patient engagement. And then the last focus point for us would be the developing an economic engine or identifying new opportunities as economic engine for the patient community. So that I think all of that is collaboration, transversal collaboration doesn't happen by magic. We have this patient engagement open forum, which is this transversal event that has been mentioned as an option earlier in the call. And so we meet virtually every quarter with like 4 or 5 sessions. And then once a year, we invite close to 200 people. Next time is 21st to 23rd of May next year in Baveno, Italy. Very nice place too, if you want to travel a little bit. And so all of you as member of NHC are more than welcome. So I think we'll put the link. So Haley's putting the link. Thank you, Haley. In there, but reach out to us if you want to come. You will see all what I've mentioned here is discussed, and it's not only a panel where we talk like I've done now a bit too much. It's more like, how do we solve it? What's your point of view? What is the tool we need to develop? What are we missing? And so we just actually co-create. We sit in workshop mode for 3 days to develop the missing bits and progress as a community. And I'm super open to questions. I'm sorry I've been long.
That was great, Nicola. I really appreciate it. And that last point you made, I think, for PFMD, for the patient community generally, it's an actionable agenda. We are very, I think, committed to helping others understand how much the patient community has to offer, the stake the patient community has in so much of this health journey. I think pharma understands that better than any other sector and has really been evolving best practice in patient engagement and all the things we've been talking about, even while looking to continuously improve and do more. I think there are lessons that we want to see migrate into other areas of the health ecosystem. But to Nicola's point, it's toward impact, toward action. To what end, we ask ourselves, because there's a rightful sense of urgency among patients to see progress being made in discovery around interventions that might pertain to their own health in ways that you could see other patients helped. And we need to just harness that sense of urgency as well as problem solving and good models to date to put those into action. We were going to take a break right now, but I think if people have questions for Nicola, I would invite them to raise their hand or just blurt them out.
I'll go, Randy. So I agree. I think there is a lot of urgency in innovation, right? And we are often approached to engage patients in trials or market research and that kind of thing. And our first sort of move is to insist on a patient advisory board before we will sort of engage our patient community, because we feel that, they need to understand the patient journey before they can go asking all these questions and just sort of steamroll the community, I guess. So I'm curious if PFMD has done any sort of patient advisory board work.
So yes, as part of so we have developed a toolbox over the years, and so we have overall guidance about the quality of patient engagement that you can apply to any activity when you work with any stakeholders, and then building on that transversal guidance, we have specific how-to guides, and we have one on the advisory board. We also have the contracts on the advisory board, but we have these how-to guides like how to design a clinical trial protocol with the patient committee, how to design a COA, a clinical outcome assessment strategy with the patient. And so we have these specific things, but we have a chapter on the advisory board. And I'm not sure how socialized it is in the US. It has become the best practice in Europe, and Eurodis is actually one of the leader on that, the CAP, so the Community Advisory Board, where the patient reverse the process. It's not a company organizing, but the patient organization articulating their needs to all stakeholders, including companies at the same time. It's a very interesting process there. Can develop on that later on if needed. Jeff.
Well, and I would definitely encourage everyone to take a look at some of the resources that Haley has flagged for us. But go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna jump off of that, Nicholas. We're really excited at Prevent Blindness. Next week is the American Academy of Ophthalmology meeting in San Francisco, and we decided to do just what you said, Nicholas, and kind of turn the tables. And we invited all of our industry partners to come to a 2-hour session, and to where we can have a discussion with all of them, not one-on-one, but the industry as a whole, with the patient community on how they can do a better job of engaging patients in the research process, all the way to bringing drugs to market. So it's the first time we've done this, and I'm certainly eager to see how engaged they'll be, especially when, they're all in the same room together. So it's going to be an interesting experiment, but we're excited to see how it comes about.
That's great.
Yeah, you probably see it's a massive shift for many people. So not necessarily an easy transformation, but at the end of the process, most of people are super happy about it. So
yeah,
I've heard only the best about it. So.
I've been pleased with the response of who's coming. So at least they're going to be in the room. We'll see if they speak up.
We'll stand by for that report. But I think that, but the point that you make is they'll be in the room, because these are such invested partners, and it's not always easy to speak up and things like that, for a variety of reasons. But it may well be that it'll lead to an understanding and further conversations that are going to be incredibly positive. So I can see that happening. Yeah. Kelly, to put you on the spot a little bit, you may have reactions to some of what Nicholas shared. I know another perspective on the landscape that you have that I'm interested in is just, where does workforce fit in? We have actually workforce issues as part of our matrix in terms of priorities at the National Health Council. When you think about patients and the kinds of things we're talking about here, it's not necessarily something that's on every agenda, but I believe that you had the opportunity to participate up at the UN for the World Assembly or General Assembly. But could you just share any thoughts you might have based on what Nicholas has shared, or any additional thoughts you might have about the landscape?
Sure. So, J&J's a long time been about nurses. So we've been doing a lot in terms of policy advocacy around health workforce, because it's, the pandemic only exacerbated an existing shortage that will continue to worsen. And then when you look at that, all these adjacencies to the patient community, in terms of, there's a youth bulge, but there's a pending, aging world where, some of these issues are going to converge and be really bad for patients. And so on the workforce side, there's a lot in terms of gender equity. I mean, if you're a community health worker in low and middle income countries, you're probably not even paid at all. And so, it's not just sort of an equity issue, but it also kind of will end up relating to quality of care, or even access to any care whatsoever if you're not lucky to be in a high income country. And just interestingly, this morning, ARP had a global conference, and I learned a factoid there. 4 out of 5 older adults 30 years from now will be in low and middle income countries. So I met with a group called Help Age International, and they don't work with patient groups, but they advocate for older adults around the world. And so, I asked that question, and, those dots hadn't really connected. And then, in terms of terminology too, the other adjacency that comes up is caregivers, and the rest of the world, they say carers. Right. For the most part, rest of the world being overgeneralizing. But there's opportunity here for patients to ally with providers and health workforce, and sort of provide mutual aid, if you will, as well as with folks who are now advocating for older adults and carers. So I'm just going to throw all of that into the mix, because there is a ton of opportunity there, and it's fun to think about.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think that is something we have a huge stake in. I love the fact that you could help be a bridge. I would have asked Jason from, the National Association of Caregivers to be a part of this call, because that is a movement that has truly been international in scope, for many, many years now. But thanks for bringing that up. I'm also curious, and maybe we can call before we take our break, on Haley. You've seen her posting items. Haley is part of the PFMD Synergist team. She's based in Canada. I just said, Haley, are you seeing any trends or any items in the landscape from that perspective of the Canadian patient groups, or just the community generally, that you think we should be aware of, or that you might want to call out?
Yeah, thanks, Randy. I appreciate this opportunity. And I think it's really building on what Nicholas has shared as well, too. And in my role working with Nicholas as a senior program director at PFMD, certainly the approach that we take for all of our tools, all of our resources, is a disease agnostic approach, but also very much global in scope, with the opportunity to be able to think about how our tools and resources can be adapted by different communities, by different cultures, by different opportunities. With that specifically in Canada, then, as I think about some of the opportunities that I've had an opportunity to learn more about or to further explore, certainly there's a very strong presence in the academic world around monitoring and evaluation, engaging patients, trying to understand the impact. But that certainly is reflected in a lot of our work as we bring it to the table through PFMD in a more global multi-stakeholder approach. I think one of the things that I also see in Canada that is perhaps a learning for some European colleagues, or potentially for the US and vice versa, is thinking about patient engagement within healthcare institutions as well. Certainly within Canada, there's very much a strong presence of patient and family impact councils within hospitals, within various different healthcare institutions. And so certainly that is an area I think that there's a lot of activity with the patient community. And certainly when I think about it more around the alignment with industry and in terms of the product development, you have to remember as well, as I'm sure you'll all appreciate, that Canada as a market is relatively small compared to some of the European or the US for any number of different companies. And so often from my experience, having worked in the pharmaceutical industry in Canada as well, we were also often very much reliant on what corporate or global headquarters were providing as well. So we had some flexibility, but a lot of the direction really came from the corporate office. And so for that reason, I think there's still some great work that's being done by any number of different companies, by J&J, by Roche, Novartis. Some of the smaller biotech companies are really reaching out in that way, but a lot of the direction comes from global and from corporate. So as I said, I think there's a few areas that certainly there's some great work that's being done in Canada. I think the other piece in the Canadian scene as well is looking at the great work of CADTH, the HTA assessment body within Canada as well. And they're really leading some terrific initiatives as to how to involve the patient community within that sort of regulatory HTA review process as well. One of the things I just wanted to put on the table as well, Nicholas has mentioned any number of the different resources and tools that we have, but one thing that I think could be quite useful for the participants here, and certainly for those that will be listening to this later, is a resource through PFMD called Synapse, which is certainly an opportunity to explore what's happening around the world. You can think of Synapse as sort of a LinkedIn for patient engagement. It's the mapping and the networking of all things to do with patient engagement. You can add your profile. You can certainly search and find other people, other initiatives, other events, other resources that could really either help you to find those items to help your work, or also put on the table the work that you're doing so other people can find your initiatives and events as well. And I think that certainly is a great resource to be able to pull down some of those geographical boundaries and be able to share the work around the world that's going on. So that's a little bit of an overview, Randy, but hopefully it gives some of the listeners and participants an opportunity to hear a slightly Canadian perspective, but at the same time recognizing, I think it was as Jory said, that the patient voices crosses boundaries. So it's really, we're looking at this much more multi-stakeholder global approach as we're pursuing any number of different resources and tools as well. So happy to answer any questions, or please feel free to reach out if anybody has specific questions as well.
Well, thank you so much, Haley. Thank you, Nicola, for giving us that sense of landscape, even while really instilling, I think, a sense of optimism that the patient community, the patient movement, the kind of progress we've been making, certainly is taking place in an environment that is really challenging right now on every level globally. But the energy within the patient community, the response we've had from our pharma partners and others, we know that there is progress to be made and innovation to occur and a contribution to be made on the part of patients that is going to be really powerful. And I think we are the people that can really help drive that, and certainly by tapping the resources that you've shared right now. So thank you so much. If people have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Haley, I know you need to step away. Maybe we can hang on to Nicola a little bit longer. Hopefully dinner is being kept warm for you. But and then we'll take a 5-minute break and come back. We'll hear from Leanne to really talk about all those things. We've touched on a few as to what about international conferences that we attend, that we host, that we contribute to. What are the nuts and bolts, and what are the kinds of things that she's learned that we can all benefit from? So let's take 5 minutes for a stretch, and we'll be back. Thank you. Okay, Ashley, are we back live?
We are, yes.
All right, very good. Well, welcome back, everyone. That was a great conversation. I think thank you all of our speakers and participants for jumping in. Right now, I'm very excited to introduce Leanne West, who I just is a real pleasure to know, I have to say. She serves with me at MDIC in an advisory capacity, and I love her insights to the medical device and technology community. Leanne is here as in her role as president of the International Children's Advisory Network, an amazing organization. And I know we were fortunate to have Dr. Omar Escontrias contribute in a session that she was a part of earlier this year. But Leanne also has a day job, chief engineer of the pediatric technologies at Georgia Institute of Technologies. And so, you know, she's really grounded in science and committed as a passionate advocate. And I couldn't be more excited to have her really share her experiences in the around the topic of international conferences, kind of anything and everything, and then encourage everyone else to chime in. But Leanne, please share with us what you know about this space. Make it all come to life for us. Make it easy.
Okay, I will. So thank you for having me here today. Great discussion so far. I'll also just add that I have 2 rare diseases of my own. So I really, have a synergy with the kids. We kind of understand each other about a lot of things. And one thing I'll start with is that even if kids are from all over the world, patients are from all over the world, if you bring them together, there's a lot of commonalities between them. And they understand each other in a way that a lot of other people can't. But let me tell you about ICANN so you know where I'm coming from. So ICANN is, again, the International Children's Advisory Network, and our members are kids. And about 95% of our kids have some sort of medical diagnosis that they deal with. And it could be anything as common as, say, asthma, all the way to the rarest of the rare diseases. And I would say probably half of our kids fit in that rare disease category. They range in age from about 8 to 18, though we don't have hard cutoffs on either side. It's really child dependent. And we have started programs for caregivers or parents, siblings, and also young adult professionals. So keeping our kids in the program once they kind of graduate from our original program. They still want to be able to share their expertise with industry or the FDA or whoever it might be. And we want them to hang around to be able to do that. But we also welcome in any young adult professional who is thinking about a career in healthcare or has maybe just started a career in healthcare, to bring those 2 together so that they can, the people who are going to be the next healthcare leaders are going to know from literally day 1 of their career that the patient should be the center of everything that they do. So that's ICANN in a super quick nutshell. But one of the things that we do with our kids every year is we bring them together for a conference. And it's really fun. And if you ever come, there's nothing else like it. And I promise you will be forever changed. It's really wonderful to see the kids interact with each other, interact with industry, give feedback on things like protocols or assent and consent or educational materials, whatever it might be. But it's really fun to see them support each other and encourage each other to speak up. So that's one thing that we do. We try to bring about 3 kids from every chapter together. We have chapters around the world on 4 different continents. We would love to have more continents involved, more chapters, but we think we're doing pretty well. But we try to bring 3 kids from each chapter together to be a part of this conference. And a lot of these families will kind of consider this their family vacation. Maybe some of these families don't have a whole lot of resources. And so we try to help offset those resources. We typically pay for the hotel room for the families, food for the families for the week, and also we give them a travel stipend. For some of our kids, and I think this is where you have to kind of think about things, for some socioeconomically challenged either countries or areas of the US, wherever it might be, we will pay for 100% of expenses for these families. And for some kids, like who are coming from Uganda, they really don't have very many resources at all. So we actually also give them a daily stipend so that if they go sightseeing with a friend one afternoon or want to get a snack when they're out with new friends that they've just met, then they have the money to do so. So I think kind of considering where your people are coming from, where your patients are coming from, and really thinking about their socioeconomic needs. That's one thing we try to pay a lot of attention to at ICANN. Another thing we do is we always have our chapter, or always have our summit where we have a chapter. And so that chapter is the host chapter. And we go back and forth between the US and the EU. So last year we were in San Diego, and this upcoming year we're going to be in Bari, Italy. But it's really fun for the host chapter kids because they are very involved in everything we do with planning the conference. They pick the activities that we're going to do for, get to know you activities. They pick the things in their town that they want to show to the other kids from around the world. They help us, with guiding things, making, kind of get excited videos, or here's how you access the subway or the train system in Europe when you don't really have one in the US. So a lot of different things like that. We try to take into account what are the major differences that kids might experience when they're going somewhere. And we really rely on that local group to help us out. And the kids love it. The local kids love it. The kids from around the world love it. So I think that's another thing too, is to really, embrace wherever you're going to hold your meeting, whether that's the US or the EU. Maybe one day we'll be in Africa. I would love that too. One thing that we always have to consider with our kids, so again, a lot of them have rare diseases and have some accessibility needs. And so in the US, it's often a little easier to find accessible resources like hotels or even buses for transportation and things like that. It's not always as easy when we do it in the EU. And a lot of, if we're going to be in Bari and they have an old town that's hundreds of years old, and they didn't really think about wheelchairs back then. And so some of the things that we do, having a site visit beforehand is really beneficial to make sure that whatever we're thinking about can be accommodated. So that's one of the things that we always do as well, is just walk what we're going to walk, go to what we think we want to see, be in the building, look at the transportation, and just make sure everything really is accessible. Because even recently, one of the places we talked to, they were like, oh, our rooms are fully accessible, but the elevator to get to the room wasn't big enough to actually accommodate a wheelchair. So not necessarily actually accessible. So we try to take into account things like that as well. Another thing we run into, since our members are kids, we need to engage them when they're out of school. So we're not taking them out of school. And we have to pay attention to when schools around the world are out. And you know what? They're not all out for the summer months, just like we are. I mean, even in the US, you get a big spread sometimes between May and September. And so that is a challenge for us. And it's one that we have a difficult time working around to make it work for every single kid out there. But we do our best. We found that the second week of July seems to be the one where the most kids are out of school. And so that's when we do our conference every year, is to be able to accommodate the most kids who can join. We look at multiple languages too. So we run our conferences in English, even though we are international. Often what will happen is that a team leader will come with the youth, or a parent will come with the youth. And sometimes the youth themselves are great in English, but there's usually at least somebody on the team that can translate for their friends. And we've offered translators before, and we have not ever been taken up on that. So I think that that's working for us. We would love it if we had lots more resources to do things in more languages, but we try to as much as we can. And our chapters actually help us out with that. And we're always looking for volunteers. If there's anyone in this crowd here who wants to help us translate some materials, we would always appreciate it. We also think about, just general accessibility in the presentations, making sure it works for people who have low vision, for example, sending out resources ahead of time in the language that they need. So a lot of different things like that we take into account. The other thing we take into account is our presenters. So a lot of time, everything we do is super interactive with the kids, getting feedback, talking to them. When we're in Europe for our conference, we usually try to have more European speakers. And when we're in the US, we try to have more US speakers. However, we also make sure that we have speakers from all over the world. So we don't want it to just be purely, US, Southern California speakers that come to talk. We want to make sure we have somebody from Italy and somebody from Belgium and wherever it might be, because we really want the kids to feel like there are other people around them that represent them, right? So we want to make sure we always have that other voice represented in what we do. Another thing, this is so crazy. I mean, like, this is like a teeny detail, but sometimes just being able to pay foreign entities from where you are can be a little bit tricky. And so sometimes we run into issues there. You also have extra fees and things like that for conversion of your cash. And I'm trying to think of what else we do. I mean, there's so many things that go on, and the conference is awesome, but those are a lot of the considerations we have while we're planning, what we're thinking about when we're planning.
Boy, that's great, Leanne, just to share, literally it's the small details, right, that add up then to this amazing experience. And I'm sure there's learning every single time,
Yep.
no matter whether you're in the US or abroad. I'll call on Jeff Todd, who's the CEO for Prevent Blindness, on our national board. He'll be stepping into the chair's role with Lisa, providing great leadership for us. Jeff, I know you have represented your organization internationally as well as have ties here. What's your reaction to Leanne, or just perspectives that you have from your own experience? Oh,
There we go.
There you are.
Thanks, Randy, and Leanne. We've been active with. We're a part of a coalition, international coalition, the International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness, and similar to many other conditions, there's this international group, and it's. I've been with Prevent Blindness 20 years, and I think the first probably 14 or 15 we were loosely engaged, but have become much more so over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think part of that is, and it's going to double down on what everyone else is saying, the world's shrinking and we're becoming much more global. We are decidedly US focused here, because so many of the US organizations that focus on vision and eye health focus internationally. Our focus is US, but we're realizing that our reach certainly is global, and that was certainly the case. It became even more true during the COVID pandemic, when so much of our work really turned virtual. We have an annual summit that we host that was US focused. The first year we went virtual, we had people from 60 different countries participating. And so that taught us that, okay, we need to be a part of this global conversation. And so I look forward to going to that meeting every year, and find that we learned so much. I was on a panel in the conference this last June was in Singapore, and I was on a panel with a leader from Zimbabwe, and we were talking about things we were doing around a global campaign together. And it was just amazing how much similarity there was between Zimbabwe and the US. Also many differences, but there's so much that you learn by being with people from all around the world that share that commonality. I'll say that one of the things we've also been able to bring is, the US does have some influence globally, believe it or not. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But about a year or so ago, this international group was trying to advance a resolution on vision and eye health at the United Nations. And for a number of political reasons, there were some, the US ambassador wasn't fully engaged or wasn't fully bought in yet. And so we were able to use some of our advocacy weight here in the US to call on her to step up. And she did, and the resolution passed. I'm not saying that it wouldn't have passed without the US there, but it certainly opened some blockages that were in the way. And so we're happy to be a part of that global community when it makes sense for us to do so. And I guess the final thing that I would mention is, well, two more. One, we're very active in World Sight Day, which is an effort that has taken off all around the world. They've been doing it for years, but the last 3 or 4 years, it's blown up much more significantly and had a much bigger impact. And that's another way that we all come together. And I would say selfishly, well, not selfishly, because I own this, that one of the things I get out of going to the international meetings is so many of our industry partners and frankly our funders are there. And I have left those meetings with leads and contacts that have brought resources to my work here in the US. And so sometimes when I'm like, gosh, that trip to Singapore is going to cost me a whole lot of money, is it worth it? When I come back with a grant from someone that's 10 times that, it's absolutely worth it. And so, you have to, all of us in the nonprofit world have to look at the fiscal side of things, and that balances out as well. So, I would just say that certainly the work that we do to be a part of the global community makes us better able to serve those here in the US.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree.
That's really
Absolutely.
helpful. Yeah. Lisa, did you have any questions or thoughts?
I do. Thanks, Randy. Thank you, Leanne and Jeff. Really love hearing your experiences. So I'm curious, when you're developing content for the US and the EU conferences, are they similar?
Yeah, for us it is. And what we might do is when we're in the US, we might have the FDA come and speak. When we're in the EU, we might have somebody from EMA come speak. So it kind of just depends on where we are. We do like to highlight the resources for that country or that area. And even things like we'll take kids on tours of the local kids hospital. We usually do have them do a service project for the local kids hospital, but it's often interesting for the kids to look and see like some of the differences between what they deal with and what it looks like in another country. Even the school system, we often work with school systems and do experiments or things like that. And I think it's fun for them to see where the commonalities are and where the differences are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would add to that from my experience that the IAPB does a really good job of similar to what Leanne said, of utilizing the resources of the countries and where they hold the conferences, and also tapping into them to help develop the agenda. This conference has mostly been in Asia or the South Pacific, a couple in Europe for the last decade. This coming year will be the first time in over a decade that it's going to be in the Americas. Next year will be in Mexico City. And so they've reached out to us to help, number one, provided guidance on how we can get more folks from the Americas to come to this conference and how we can help build the agenda in a way that makes it unique from some of the previous year ones.
That's great.
Thanks. Just one more question. Leanne, you spoke about translations, and Jeff, I'm not sure how your community handles this too. When they bring people with them to the conference, the kids, and they have a translator, does it get kind of hectic in the room when you have people sort of whispering and translating in real time?
Not really. I would say a lot of the kids who end up coming speak at least decent English, and they'll rely a little bit on the person next to them. But some things are also don't really require a translation, right? When we do some of the activities that we do, the kid knows how to play with another kid, whether you're really speaking the same language or not. So, I mean, there's sometimes when we're doing some things more technical, but what we try to do in that case is break the kids up into smaller groups, and they go off and do some activities and they come back together and report. And so they're able to talk better in those smaller groups that we send them off to. So that's one of the ways we really try to help get around it, is they can really help the child who's maybe not understanding as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Omar and I hosted the head of the Japanese Patients Association, was here in Washington doing a series of meetings. and he had some English, but he just used his phone and had an app, which might have been a Google Translate or something. I wouldn't recommend it if you've got 100 kids in the room all using that kind of technology. It was kind of noisy, and I suppose he could have had earbuds in, but I was impressed with just how accurate it appeared to be. I'll never quite know. But there are some tools out there. Everything kind of comes with cost, but fortunately, some of those tools have become much more mainstream now, which can be helpful for us, I think, as well. But well, I just think it's great that you would participate in this call, share this with us. I know we're coming close to time. I think you made the point, Jeff, and others have made it, that our partners in the pharma community and just broadly are clearly operating in a global context. And so we certainly welcome any thoughts that they have on how we could expand our reach. Create an opportunity for Leanne to have her meeting in Africa. Certainly work with the Americas. We are all part of a network that's patient-centric, and it feels so great. And I just really appreciate everybody who's been on this call. Lisa, with the time remaining, did you want to kind of summarize and maybe just see what our participants are thinking about what's next?
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to hear from the group what your unmet needs are. Maybe we should start our own needs and wants conversation as it relates. But I feel just so grateful to the other speakers for sharing their experiences, right? We're stronger together. And I think this just shows that there's so much work we can do together. Randy, you mentioned maybe the National Health Council putting together some kind of calendar where where we're participating in certain meetings. That, I mean, Leanne, I presume there are a lot of patient organizations that are part of the National Health Council that could have children that could come to the conference you're talking about, right?
Yeah, we would love that. We would definitely welcome it.
So I think if we had sort of a central resource, then maybe we could look at it periodically and see where there's synergies, and we could participate together.
Yeah, we would love that.
That sounds great. Well, and I just think even in hosting, there's just so many ways in which, if we are just kind of communicating what activities we're pursuing, what we're interested in, lessons learned, I think certainly PFMD has tremendous, wealth of resources, as well as this through Synapse, this global network of people who are just so motivated. I know, Lisa, you kind of came to be in the role that you're in through a family connections, and you just see, whatever, that's not unusual in our community, but that's passion that clearly drives all of us. But this has really been great. I think time-wise, Lisa, do you want to just kind of close things out, see if people have any last thoughts, if they have a call to action to us or to each other that they'd like to express? And I think that'll make for a great time together here today.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Well, I just want to thank the sponsors again for making this happen. And I certainly hope that we could go back to them to continue this program and continue the work that I feel like we've just started, right? So much great information to share. And I know, Randy recently was at the World Health Summit, and a lot of opportunity there to increase patientricity on a global level. I'm sure Randy can, that could be a whole nother webinar. So I think, folks, please continue to reach out. Let our friends at National Health Council know how you're feeling. Any more questions? I'm sure that, we could field those through this program. But thank you for your interest, and thank you for joining us. And Randy, thanks for putting us all together.
Well, absolutely. It's my pleasure. We will share all the links that were posted today, and I'll share something on the Berlin conference that the World Health Assembly was amazing. And then I would encourage all of you, we'll send a follow-up evaluation, and I would encourage you there to kind of just say, how is this helpful? What would you like to see us address next time? What would you like to see us post on the website, or just make sure we incorporate? I think, it's so energizing to kind of hear what our colleagues are doing. We could share some of those experiences through our insider, through our newsletters and things that go out. And I think then that spurs ideas for, oh, well, I could be involved in that. Or how did I miss that conference? I'm not going to miss next time. Or POF. When is that again, Nicola?
21st, 23rd of May, 2024.
There you go. Mark your calendars here. Baveno is situated on Lake Maggiore, just north of Milan. And so the setting is conducive to great thoughts and great advancements in the patient community. But Lisa, thank you for your co-leadership here. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to those that were kind of drafted by virtue of attendance. Thank you, Kelly, and others who, and Annie, who maybe weren't planning on being part of the agenda, but really contributed. It couldn't be better. Jory, thank you so much. You heard Jeff mention a Mexico City conference. You can start your map quest as to how to participate there, since you said that's on your wish list. But thank you all. Please do let us know how this has been a worthwhile experience and how we can do more to facilitate what's already a great level of energy from our membership supporting patients globally. Really appreciate you all. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.